Hello and welcome to another Blender tutorial brought to you by the Louis Art. In this tutorial, we'll be trying to recreate the popular artwork used to promote the geometry node. You know, the one with landscape and lots of pebbles scattered around. So we'll be trying to recreate it with the latest version of Blender, which is the first actual master build of Blender that has geometry node enabled by default. So we'll be using it to kind of get acquainted with the new geometry node because it seems like it's here to stay, so we have no choice than to get good at it. Okay, so I've gone ahead and created like some baseline assets that we'll be using. So we have the ground plane, we have the little rock or pebbles that will be scattering along or around this landscape. So let's just go ahead and start. So basically, when you talk about node system by now, if you're already familiar with how it works, it's just basically understanding this different step by step. And with if Blender implements it well, it will be much more easier for beginners to get acquainted with it. But I'm going to try to do a very good job so that you can really follow along. Okay, so unlike this new version of Blender, the way we usually add um, stuff like this is to use the particle node. But with Blender undergoing some change, the new way to do that is still related to the particle node, but this time we call it the points cloud. So it's kind of relatively the same thing. They kind of offer close to the same thing, but particle point cloud seems more powerful because you're seeing the actual geometry, which gives more room for cool modifiers and gives it more flexibility in the future. Okay, so once you add the points cloud, this is like a container for the instance and maybe in the future all your particle simulation. So for the point cloud, this is where we'll be applying the geometry node. Okay, so if you have downloaded the latest build of Blender and you go to Blender builder.blender.org, this is where you'll be able to find it. You want to download the latest Blender 2.92 alpha. I'll try to leave a link in the description so you guys can access it easily. Once you have that set up, you don't need to do anything extra. You just need to let me show you how to do that. So if we have like a brand new scene like this, you can just in this right corner, once you see this cross, you can just drag it out, go into this tab here, and we can select the geometry node. This is where all the magic will happen. Okay, so now we have our point cloud selected. We just want to hit on new, and it's going to create a new point. It's going to create a new node for us. So it's doing a couple of things. It's not just only creating a node here, but since Blender is still relying on our modifier stack, it creates a new modifier stack, which you could also access by clicking on generate geometry node. So the points cloud already have one modifier, which is the geometry node. Okay, so you should bear that in mind. And you can also apply this onto objects by clicking on the object, clicking on new. You can add a geometry node, or you could even just go directly from the modifier and click on geometry node, and it will set up everything for you. So let me just go ahead and save this scene. I'll save it to my desktop. Okay, so let's keep going. So since we'll be applying the whole effect onto the points cloud geometry, which we could just basically go ahead and name these rock distribution. So you want to try to keep your scene very organized, because since Blender will be using it as a data, it will be nice so that you can easily locate the stuffs. So since we'll be using the point distribution, that's where we can go to add and look for points and click on point distribution. Okay, this is one node we need. We also need one other node, so it's also in point instance. So the point distribution node is quite basic, and that's intentional because since this is a node, kind of a node environment, you have like more flexibility of adding more node ahead or behind each node to add more functionality, and we'll be doing that in a bit. So for the point instance, we can go ahead and select the objects. So right now it has no provisions for collection, so it only deals with individual objects. So let's just go ahead and select the small rock. And if we increase the density, right now you see nothing. So let's reduce this to like um, zero point 0.6. The reason you see nothing is because the point cloud needs a geometry to be able to reference as a sprouting point. And right now it has nothing. It's just a floating point cloud which has it cannot really show anything. So we need to tell Blender that we need this particular ground geometry to be the sprouting point of this particular these stones or instances. Okay, so we'll just select the points cloud. So we can delete this geometry node, and there's a new node that was just recently added, and that node is called object info. So if you go to input and click on object info, you can get it. Okay, that allows us to import any geometry in the scene onto a node tree. So we're going to put this geometry onto geometry object with selecting the ground. And once we do that, you can see it has discovered a sprouting point to be able to generate it. So we can look at this node now, and we have little or no more parameter to adjust this particle. So we could go ahead and play with the density. This increases or decreases the amounts of particles you can see in the scene. I think it's better to call it instances. You can see in the scene. Okay, and then you have little or no parameter. That's where we can add more nodes to have more access to be able to do stuff like that. Of course, you can also go into the edit mode and scale this down and move this around, which is an option. Or you could select this object, create a new node tree, add geometry transform, and you can scale this down as needed. This is good, but it's not very efficient. Since you're working with a particle system, you want a node that recognizes the particle system or the instance system going in the scene. So let's do that. So the one node that recognizes that is called the attribute random attribute node. Okay, so this random attribute has currently has two parameters, which is the float and the vector. So you could switch between these two drop downs. The floats is pretty good for like values that has one that can be I mean, you can use both of them for any instance, and let me just go ahead and show you. I think showing is more better way to go about it. So if we move any of this value, you can see nothing is happening. That's because we need to ask it to react to certain attribute. So the attribute we can ask it to react to, it's currently we want to adjust the scale of each particle. So let's get that attribute. So we can go to item, and since we're trying to adjust the scale, so we want to copy this name scale. So we can just write scale here. So the S is capital, is lowercase s. So it's case sensitive. If we have this at scale, you can see it's nothing's gonna happen. So it's quite case sensitive. So you make everything small later. And now we can actually go in and adjust each of the scale, like you can see. And the great thing is that we have like random sizes with the minimum and maximum here. So if you set this to 0, you get some nice contrast between them. Okay, and since the origin point is right at the bottom of the rock, that's why we have it placed right at the tip here. So if we do something like this, if we do object origin to geometry, you can see it's penetrating geometry, but since we have the origin point here at the bottom, it's going to be placed right there at the bottom. Okay, so we also need to be able to adjust the rotation. So a great way to, as you can tell already, we can duplicate this random attribute node and call this rotation. And we can actually adjust the rotation here. But to get more, let's just change this to 0 and this to 1. So to have more control over the like X rotation, Y rotation, you can switch this to vector. This gives you more control. So it also has a minimum value and a maximum value. So if you want it to rotate in the X axis, you can do that. Okay, if you want it to rotate on any several axes, you can get some randomization here. So you can just play with this till you get a value you're happy with. So currently there's no particular um, I don't I've tried to use the attributes to kind of write location to adjust rotation, but nothing happens. So if you want to adjust the location, sorry, you can only do it as a whole. So if we add the geometry transform node and move the translation Z, you can see we can adjust the entire point cloud system here. So we'll just leave it as it is right now. So another important factor you need to have is kind of affects where do you want it to be generated. So currently it's been generated in the entire geometry. So we want to be able to isolate or control the position. So that's where weight painting comes in. So let's go ahead and create a new weight paint, and we'll create a 3 vertex group. So we'll call this small, medium, and large. Okay, so these are basically the vertex group for each of this rock distribution, and I'm going to show you how you will combine everything. So for the small, we just paint in where we want the small rocks to be generated. So we want it to be generated along the middle point. Okay, so once we have that, we can now select the point cloud, and here where it said point distribution, this is where we can write it. So we just need to write it small there. Okay, so if we see that it is not giving us the right name, there are several factors to that. Let's see. So we could either be getting the name wrong, so let's do something. We can just, let's see, I think we painted in the wrong group, which is okay. So we can actually just copy this name, right, go into the point cloud and paint it. That should be, that should do it. What's happening? Let's isolate everything first and see. Let's change it in beta and see if it fixes that. I mean, this is still like a test project, so interesting. Let's undo that. It should be able to work. Okay, I know why. Um, the subdivisions, so probably that's why. So we could just fix this by applying the subdivision, and that should be good for now. And we can paint the weights again. Maybe it was work because I suspect it's working. It was might be working with the wrong geometry name count. So let's score this small and repeat that process. Small. Okay, and the density sets the appropriate value. So you can, it's the problem was just the subdivision, so it was giving it a wrong input and confusing in it. I mean, they will probably fix it in the future, but uh, that's if you encounter that, that's a quick solution. Just apply the subdivision and you keep moving. Okay, so we see now how we can use the vertex group to kind of isolate areas. So as you paint, you get like real-time feedback. Okay, so since we are dealing with small pebbles, we need to scale them down. So let's scale this down a bit. Increase the density since smaller tends to be a lot, and that's that. So for the next, since this is a node setup, we don't need to create anything. Just need to duplicate this node, connect the geometry to geometry. So basically what we're distributing are just the point distribution onto the point instance and everything here. Okay. So for this instance, we'll be creating a new vertex group. We'll call this medium. And we'll create another one, we'll call this big. Okay, and we can just paint and also paint for the medium. We can adjust this later so it's not one and done. So we can put this medium here and select the medium rock. So for us to preview it, you can just plug this into here. Let's make sure we have the correct name. So I'm just going to copy this particular name. So that's why I said naming is quite important in, with this new setup. So because we're dealing with data. So we have the correct name now, and you see it works nicely. So we can increase the scale since it's like a more bigger rock. Adjust the rotation and stuff. So for us to combine the two particles, we just need to add a geometry, join geometry, and that's all you need. You just combine them, and you see both of them working in tandem. So we can adjust the scale slightly and adjust the distribution of each. So basically it's same thing for the even the larger one. So we can select this, duplicate, connect the source geometry, which is the ground plane, and using the join node we can combine that. So the placement doesn't matter. And for this we'll be switching this to big if I'm correct, and then we'll select the big rocks, and voila, so we have this working. Okay, so you, like I said, you can select this ground node, going to the weight, select the big, and have like a live preview as you paint them in, and this is what you get. Of course, let's adjust the density, and we have it. So another cool stuff you could get with this object info node and join node is like, let's say you want to have like a node tree with this instance, but you want to also like have a little an animation of one of them moving, or a couple of them placed looking natural and being animated. We can do that easily. So we can add the join node. Okay, this, duplicate this and select like a big rock node. So we'll combine them. So right now it has created an extra, that's created another geometry just like this. So let's add a transform. Okay, and we can just move this. So we can have it in a place where we can just put it in incognito mode till we want it to activate. I'm pretty sure like probably in the future they will have a much better system of handling this stuff, but so far this is what we have, as you can see. And these parameters are animatable, so you can insert keyframes and do anything. You can actually duplicate this, so sorry, just duplicate the transform since we're still referencing the same geometry, and just move this around. So if you want to have your own custom setup with the entire node, so that you can apply cool effects, you can add an extra transform node. Let's reset this. So you can create cool custom effects as needed. Yeah, so that's basically a nice introduction. I'm also new to this, so I'm really excited what's going to be able to, what we're going to be able to do with this. The node might look complicated from far, but everything is just experimenting and watching tutorial and keeping updates with the development, and you'll be able to follow along with everything happening. I think this has a lot of potential, and this is just scratching the surface. I'm pretty sure once the whole community gets along with it, it's like there's no limit to what we can accomplish with this particular stuff. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope it was informative. Please, if you wish to see more from me, don't forget to hit that subscribe. Like my channel kind of deal with kind of problem solving kind of things, And if you're interested to see more kind of this tutorial on geometry nodes and other cool features in Blender, you can just subscribe, like this video, so that YouTube can suggest it to more Blender users that will find this very useful. So thank you for now. Bye bye. I'll see you later.